We're celebrating moving from that place of sin to a place of salvation, to a place of liberty, to a place of wholeness. And the fact of the matter is that Jesus went on the cross so that we were able to get to that place. And I want to tell you, I wish it could have been done another way. I wish that somehow, God could have just, sprinkled fairy dust over the whole world and changed the situation. But the reality is that I don't think that people would have acknowledged it. I don't think that people would have taken much notice. That somehow Jesus needed to go to the cross for a reason. And I think that's why we call it Good Friday. It's not because the actual incident was good, but the aftermath, what came afterwards was what was good. What came afterwards was the liberation. And we heard that in our gospel reading read for us this morning. That the women and the men and the disciples got to the tomb and they found that Jesus was no longer there. He was risen. Just as Jesus has said, just as he'd prophesied, just as he'd promised. Jesus was no longer, just as God couldn't be contained in the temple or the Holy of Holies, nor could Jesus be contained by this outer body that has so many limitations in this world. Jesus needed to blow everything up and everything out in order that the Holy Spirit could flood into the world, into people's lives, and they were able to move from the places of no relationship with God to a whole and holy relationship with God. That's what we're promised in this Easter resurrection. So I want to ask a question, and I guess it's a question, it's rhetorical. I'm always dangerous when you ask questions from the pulpit, so please don't feel free as if you have to respond, because I will probably try to answer that same question as I'm preaching. But I want to tell you, why is it that people who are the followers of Jesus always seem to want to talk about the sin in their lives? Why is it that people who are followers of Jesus always want to talk about the sin in other people? Why is it that the people who follow Jesus always want to seem to walk around, it feels like sometimes, with this big heavy cloud above their heads, as if they are walking around in sackcloth and ashes, full of doom and gloom? I want to tell you, a religion that's full of doom and gloom isn't a religion I'm very attracted to. I'm not really attracted to that kind of a religion. I'm attracted to a religion of salvation that frees me from those places of doom and gloom. And that's when Jesus went to the cross, that's what he did. He freed us from those places of sin, of shame, of guilt, of doubt. He freed us from those places so that we would no longer have to live under them. And yet, how many Christians live as if they're under this cloud of sin all the time, and no matter what they think, what they do, it's never good enough. When Jesus went to the cross, he said, it's good enough. It is done. It is finished. It is over. And that any one of us, if we are still under this cloud of sin or under this cloud of feeling bad about ourselves, I want to tell you, we're putting Jesus back on that cross every time that we do that. And that's not a resurrection faith. That's not a resurrection faith. A resurrection faith is saying that we are embodied and empowered to be better than we were, to be the very best that we can be. And that the whole principle of salvation is about rescuing us, freeing us from those places of doubt and sin and shame and guilt, and setting us free to the promises of the Holy Spirit, those promises that are empowering, those promises that are life-transforming, those promises that are transformation, those promises that are full of resurrection. Isn't that what Jesus did on Easter Sunday? Was he transformed his body from what it was hanging on a cross on Good Friday to a resurrected body that people all over the world were able to see. And certainly, at times they didn't recognize him. They knew that Jesus was in their midst because they heard words of liberation and they heard words of good news. Sometimes I wish the church could listen to itself. Could listen to itself about how it oppresses its people. How many of us have been in churches where we've been oppressed under the leadership of those churches? I tell you, it's true. We've been oppressed under the leadership of church leaders. Now, I think they have a vested interest, but it's got nothing to do with Jesus. You know, they have a vested interest in keeping us oppressed, but it's got nothing to do with Jesus. Because everything about Jesus is laying an expectation on us to fulfill our destinies. Everything about Jesus is laying a thing upon us of finding our freedom in Jesus, our liberty in Jesus. That's what everything is about. We've moved, sisters and brothers, we've moved from the place of sin. And we've journeyed to a place of salvation. We've journeyed to a place of freedom. And yet, how many of us, I said this at the 9 o'clock, you know, it's not just about putting Jesus back on the cross, but how many of us put ourselves back on the cross? You know, every time that something happens that somebody says that we're doomed for, and instead of finding the freedom and not believing, we put ourselves back on the cross. Well, I want to tell you, sisters and brothers, it's time to get off the cross because somebody else needs that wood and not you. True. Somebody else needs it. You know, somebody who's oppressed might need it. But I want to tell you, and I tell you, sometimes as LGBT people and our allies, sometimes we're the best at oppressing ourselves. We don't need the world to oppress us. We do it for ourselves. I'm going to tell you, I'm tired of living like the victim. I'm tired of having to pull out my oppressed card just for people to like me. You know? I'm tired of pulling out whatever card I need in order for somebody to like me. Get over it. The truth of the matter is that if we don't start living as if we're free, if we don't start believing that we're free, if we don't start believing that we've moved from this place of sin to this place of liberation and salvation, why should the world treat us like we're equals? Why should the world believe that we are worthy?